Welcome to The Defiant Spirit, a podcast about discovering meaning, purpose, and resilience in the most challenging, difficult, and darkest moments of our lives through what my teacher and mentor, Dr. Viktor Frankl, called the defiant power of the human spirit. That spirit that is within you, that spirit that is calling to you, that spirit that is you. I'm Dr. Baruch. This is The Defiant Spirit. And now, on to our podcast. Hey, welcome to the Defiant Spirit podcast. I'm Baruch Levy, also known as B, and you already know who I am, but you don't know who this fine-looking gentleman is on the other end of this Zoom call, my good friend, Dave Mann. How you doing, Dave?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm thrilled that you decided to join me on this podcast. And for those who can't see, Dave is, as you know, he's on this call with me, and we're going to be exploring today a topic that is near and dear to my heart and my good friend Dave's heart. What it means to be a man, what it means to come to terms with being a man. I'm just going to give a little context, but Dave, maybe just give us like a 30,000 foot view of who this dude is on the call with me.
Yeah. So 53 years old, born and raised in California. Lion's share of the youth was spent on a 600 cow dairy in Northern California. Raised, in two ends of the state. Parents got divorced when I was young. Only child by those folks. Gentile father, Jewish mother. Raised primarily, with the Jewish faith, but spent probably more than half my life, young years, living on the dairy. So didn't get a lot of influence. So I had a really diverse kind of spiritual upbringing, if you will. And then, did the athletics thing in college, dealt with a life of not knowing how to be, a lot of insecurities, a lot of assholey behavior. And a lot of therapy leads me to now, which is happily married to Jody for the last 20 plus years, two wonderful daughters, one in her career in Los Angeles, one in college at Montana at Montana State. And I'm a contractor, and truly am finally living my best life.
Of everything you said, it's all important. What I'm taken by is the order in which you said it, because lots of guys that I would introduce, no harm, no foul, but they'll lead with, I am a contractor. And that was barely made the top 30 ways that you've identified yourself already, in our short call together, which I think says a lot and probably takes us into the heart of our conversation.
Oh, thank you. It's certainly wasn't conscious, but spent a lot of time not only with you, but with other people that I care about, trying to figure out my life and my journey. And so I'm always geeked to talk about it.
Dave and I, for those who are just meeting Dave and don't know, I haven't, mentioned you before, but Dave and I have become really like soul brothers, like reunite. It's more like a reuniting. He's one of those relationships. You're one. I'll talk to you as if you're here, because you are here. You're one of those relationships in my life that it's just goes beyond the time frame, in this physical world of only knowing you for a year or two or however long it's been, and it goes much deeper. And I just think that you have to take those relationships in your life seriously, and I take our relationship very seriously.
Thank you. I agree. I'm very excited about where we're going, and I feel very, very connected and close to you, and I need help, man. And I feel like, we can help each other in that realm.
So where we have come from, where we are going, this, collaboration at a soul level has been, for anybody listening, has been a progression, and we are progressing towards a formal offering, a formal program. I'm not going to announce it here, but, do stay tuned. This is not a one-off conversation. Anybody who's listening has heard me talk with some other guys, especially Scott Schaffman, who I haven't yet introduced Dave to, but he'll get to know. And all these guys in my life are saying the same thing. And we have a couple other buddies who we're involved with in this project, which is we need formal places, we need spaces, we need conversations to have meaningful encounters. And that's what this is about, meaningful encounters for men. Because, as much as I like having them with women, Ariella, my wife, Jody, Dave's wife, they seem to naturally find them on their own, a little more organically all throughout their life. But I don't know, Dave, you can comment on this as well as I can. It just seems to me that men aren't wired to seek out these conversations, or aren't culturated to have these conversations, or aren't comfortable with having these conversations, but they need to have these conversations.
Yeah, it's couldn't agree more. And Jody and I were having this conversation this morning, and I'm in a tough spot with a guy that I care about, and the relationship, may be on pause, it may be over, and it was over some silly stuff. I made a concerted effort to apologize and ask for forgiveness, and I didn't get the response that I was hoping for. And my wife said, "Why do you care? Why do you want to be friends with this guy?" And I said, "Because I care about him, and he was a valuable friend in my life, and I don't have a lot of friends, like you do. Like you have a huge network of all these great women in your life, and so I cherish it, and it's important to me, and I want to hang on to it. And it may not be meant to be. It's as another good friend of ours always says, there's a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and I want to be really clear on which one of those three each of my relationships are, but I don't want to be the reason for something ending. I'm looking for solid men in my life. It's really important to me. So yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, and I think it brings us to the topic that I wanted to really hit on in this first podcast together, because I don't know your friend from Adam, but I know a lot of friends like him, and we'll call him Adam. I know that's not his name, but it's the first man, so maybe we'll always come back to, instead of Joe Schmo, we'll go with Adam. But there are a lot of Adams out there who, when you start touching on these nerves, these sensitive pressure points, it starts bringing up stuff in them. I mean, whenever we get angry, whenever we're hurt, it always comes back to me. Nobody can make me as a grown man feel anything. I choose to interpret the signals, to take the message, to trigger in myself my feelings. That's what it means to be a man. A true man is I got to take responsibility for what I'm feeling. And I see a lot of Adams out there who run from, as we'll get into, looking at this stuff to looking in the mirror. And I imagine, there's a lot of truth in what you brought up in this, Adam.
And, I was Adam also, and so I get it. I mean, I've been there, and I've walked that path, and life has become so much easier and so much more enjoyable and so much lighter. And I feel so much more connected. And, I'm not operating from a place of fear like I was for so many years. So when I see these Adams, I tend to judge, from the perspective of, it's just a lack of evolution. And if I can help share my story, or, introduce, folks like that to guys like you, and bring them into our network and our circle, I just feel like we're going to make their lives better and the world a better place.
So that brings me to the content. What I wanted to at least frame our conversation around. We don't have to stick to it, but I'm bringing this in, this poem, which I'm going to share with a lot of guys that I'm working with. And I just did a podcast with a friend of mine, Scott, who I mentioned before, who we talked about this poem. And I think it's interesting to hear different men and their take on this poem, at least as a starting point. It's not an end point. I think it's really the beginning, as I've seen it working with men on their journey. This poem was given to me by my grandpa Jack. My grandpa Jack is to me what I'm sure you'll resonate with, Dave, your grandpa Seymour, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. What he was to you, a very important father figure, particularly sometimes in the absence of my father's presence. And he gave me this poem when I can never remember, but it was sometime like late teens, early 20s. I'm sure he saw something in me that needed to read this poem. because I'm sure I wasn't my highest, best self. And he had kept this poem on his desk during his career. My grandpa worked as a stockbroker in Los Angeles at Bear Stearns, which is no more.
Right.
And I think he grappled with being a stockbroker. He had always wanted to be something a little more obviously, sort of humanities related. He would have been made a great he would have made a great rabbi or social worker or something, but he had to do what he had to do, and I think that he grappled with it. And I at least I think that's why he kept this poem on his desk. It's a poem that goes back to the 30s, and it's a little dated in language, but I kind of like that because it reminds me of a different era and the men that came before us, and for me particularly my grandpa. But I could just as easily this is something that would resonate with Grandpa Seymour, or if you're listening on this call, to your grandpa or to your father, to somebody important that came before you and upon whose shoulders we're standing. So this is called The Guy in the Glass for anybody listening. Actually, even if you're watching it, I don't have it up on the screen. Here we go. By Dale Wimbrow, 1934. When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you king for a day, then go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that guy has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The feller whose verdict counts most in your life is the guy staring back from the glass. He's the feller to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear up to the end. And you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if that guy in the glass is your friend. You may be like Jack Horner and chisel a plum. That just means that you think you're a wonderful guy. But the man in the glass says you're only a bum if you can't look him straight in the eye. You can fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass. But your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the guy in the glass. So that is The Guy in the Glass. That opens up something in me, but I want to know, Dave, first of all, when I sent it to you a couple of days ago, was that the first time you've heard it? And I guess what was your initial reaction to the poem?
Well, it spoke to me. I'm knee deep in my own journey and have been for a long time. So I'm a sponge to, anything that resonates with, sorry. Hey, shh. Hold on. Can I let them out? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. It's another male in need of some work.
Hold on. Yeah. I'm a sponge to, anything that I feel, in my heart and my gut. And so when I read that, it's exactly what I took away. I shared it with men that I care about right away. And there's been so many great men in my life. And if I had a do-over, I would say, listen sooner, pay more attention. You had great mentors when you weren't ready to hear it. And it reminds me of, a couple sayings that I've used over time, which is, when the student is ready, the master will appear. Well, I had dozens of probably wonderful masters, but it took me a long time to be ready. And then I had another great mentor that used to always say, remember the men who dug the well from which we drink the water. And I mean, that hits me because that's the context I've been carrying for, probably 12, 15 years now. When I really was ready. I think I was ready probably about 12 years ago to really start taking my life in the direction and being able to look at the man in the glass, which I can confidently tell you that I wasn't ready, before that time. So for me, it's meaningful and I love the context around it.
So getting to know you, being a part of your journey, and just knowing the men listening out there and my own journey as well. I'm in it with you. It's that paragraph in the middle that I feel like the whole thing turns on, and I'll read it again. He's the feller to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear up to the end. And you passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the guy in the glass is your friend. Right. And I feel like stuff that you've been grappling with, certainly I've been grappling with, every guy I know has been grappling with, is what's called our friend Cam, who's hopefully listening to this, calls it, what is it called? The 10-10-10?
Yeah. I'm always checking in as a 10.
Yeah. And what's the 10-10-10? It's like
It's like family, business, and personal.
So you know the 10-10-10. We're all guilty of it. I'm not picking on just the Adams out there. Um, it's that, hey, how you doing, man? Oh, I'm good. I'm 10-10-10, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I'm good. My dad's version of it was I'm fine,
Yeah.
which was his way of saying, like, don't ask me. I'm not really going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's this faking it, right? I mean, this poem starts getting into like that last line. You can fool everybody down the pathway. I'm 10-10-10. I'm
Yeah.
good. It's all good.
Yeah.
But there's a facade, right? And
Yeah.
you got to do a lot of work.
It's seeking out those relationships where people have a genuine interest in how you're really doing. I've had, a lot of men smarter than me, tell me, when I check in with my version of 10-10-10, which is, hey, I'm great, everything's great. Really? Tell me, like, how are you really doing? And there was a period of time when it's like, do you really want to hear it? Because I've been raised in this culture that people don't care how I'm really doing. And if I started to tell you, I might scare you. If I start to tell myself, it might scare me. And so, you know, you and I have been super fortunate to spend our time with men and women and, people that are on the journey of enlightenment. They want to learn, they want to grow. They understand it. And it's, as Cam also says, better together. It's so much more fun and safe, and for me, healthy to do it with people that I know care about me, and vice versa.
But you had to get to a point, right? That's what this poem is really getting into, is where you're at least willing to go to the mirror and say not 10, not 10, not 10, right? And be honest about that. And like Scott, who you'll meet, is very forthcoming about this. When I assigned him this poem and this work to go to the mirror, I literally assigned it to a lot of guys I work with. He said he couldn't look that guy in the eye.
Yeah.
Right. This was 3 or 4 years ago. He didn't like that guy in the mirror. So what did he do? He just didn't go to the mirrors, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Right.
Did you ever have that? I know I had that experience. Did you?
Yeah. I mean, I was best at bullshitting myself. I, I, I could lie to everybody, but I could really lie to myself. And, it's that old adage that we've been taught too, which is, fake it till you make it. So there was some higher, meaning behind what I think I was doing unconsciously, which was I was just, trying to stay alive. I was on the lifeboat trying to make it to the next island, the next stop, whatever my safe haven was. And I didn't know how to identify it. I certainly understand it now. I see it now. I was raised around, you know, Neanderthal level thinkers, for many, many years, not because they didn't have the ability or the intelligence. It's that was the culture and the way in which they were raised. And so, to be where you and I are at now in our mid 50s, comparing ourselves to our fathers and our grandfathers and the times they grew up in. I mean, these conversations, I can't imagine were happening. And so, at this point, I feel very, very fortunate. And, to your question, I probably looked myself in the mirror, Baruch, but, I was only seeing what I wanted to see. I didn't want to hear what the truth was.
It's true. It's interesting you say that. Now that you do say that, my grandfather, and this poem was written in 1934, so it was like, Dale Wimbrow. I don't know him from Adam, but I know he wasn't seeing a therapist or a coach or
Yeah.
right reading
Yeah.
books on inner transformation. I mean, that
Right.
just wasn't the way. But he even wrote this poem to reflect that. Right? It's not him sitting down with his therapist or his friends or his men's group and looking them in the mirror. He's looking at himself. Like all he had, my grandfather, think about it. It's like, I'm sure he did some of this work on his own as much as he could, but he was alone on the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got me thinking about my grandfather, who came, from a very close family of six kids, lost their mother when they were all, 12 and under. And so the default thought I have is they only had each other. They came from, fortunately, a pretty loving family. I don't know if identifying them as functional or dysfunctional is fair, considering the times. And, my grandfather was a first generation, and, his father barely spoke English. They were very blue collar. But, I think they knew how to work hard and they knew how to love one another. So that's my fantasy or illusion or hunch of why he turned out to be a great guy. And his siblings were great people too. From there was a lot of disconnecting. So how I ended up where I ended up, I don't know that that's important, but I've certainly found my way back, and I'm very grateful.
No, I think it's really part of our conversation, not only now, but in, the work that we're evolving, the programs we're putting together, is to start, and maybe we'll even back up next time and start with the digging the wells that were dug for us conversation, because Viktor Frankl says it in Man's Search for Meaning, quoting a famous quote, but it's easy to look down upon a giant when you're standing on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like just so easy. My grandfather fought in World War II, and he saw things he couldn't talk about. He was one of the liberators of a concentration camp. In my imagination, I always imagine him liberating Dachau, where Frankl was liberated, and neither one of them were famous, but maybe they just brushed past each other.
Yeah.
Each upon whose shoulders each of whom I stand.
Yeah.
And what they went through, we don't have to go through. And in part, we don't have to go through it because of men like my grandfather, men like your Grandpa Seymour.
Yeah. 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 No, I that's never lost on me. And probably to a fault, it's still, I'm still in that phase of, I can look myself in the mirror certainly more comfortably now, but it's hard to take credit. It's a lot of the work I'm still doing is, boy, I was sure lucky. I have all these, great men in my life, and great women, and a great wife who's stood by me and been patient with me and loved me through my own, just for lack of a better word, just, my own asshole, period of times in my lives, and in my life rather. And so that's still a challenge for me to not just defer all credit to the men that came before me.
Well, but that's that passage in here that says, it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in the life is the guy staring back from the glass. It only matters up to a point, until you can take credit for it. I mean, that's part of the work. It's not taking credit for all of it. It's taking credit for taking responsibility of what's yours.
Yeah. And that's a challenge for me for sure. And I'm open to those conversations all the time, and you're helping me through a lot of that. And, my wife certainly helps me through a lot of that. And I take, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and, I have to get back on the horse again and, look in the proverbial mirror again, and, remind myself that I have done a lot of work, and I have taken a lot of correct action to get here. For whatever reason, it's that Rolodex of the parts of me that I don't like, that I'm still working hard to purge.
I think, though, and I go back to how you introduce yourself, and I already commented on that, but I think that's a big part of the evolution of your work. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here, and I know you'll resist this, but I'll say it anyways, is because I want guys, who are you're in your mid-50s, brother. I'm only 51. You have guys who are listening, who are in our age range, and you're an example of showing up and doing the work and looking in the mirror and not liking yourself and looking again and again and again and again and digging deeper. But I think a lot of it came down to the way you introduced yourself, because I imagine there was a time when you said, hey, I'm Dave, I'm a contractor, and I'm married, and I'm a father, and I'm all these other things. And that, to me, again, is so telling of the work that you've done.
No, that's cool. Thank you. And that's interesting. And I'm happy that that's, how I'm naturally, I guess, thinking of my life. On the most basic level, I'm a contractor, for the simple reason that, that's the path that, we've chosen to help support our lifestyle and our family. And so there, it's been, we've been very lucky. We obviously have been through a lot of tough times too, which to be fair, 2008 through 2012 was an incredibly hard time financially, economically throughout the world. And, that's probably when the work really started. Because as Ray Dalio says in Principles, folks don't make change until the pain becomes so severe they can't tolerate it anymore. And so not only was I not really happy with who was staring at me back in the mirror, but I was going broke simultaneously. And I couldn't, I couldn't support my family in the way that I had not only committed to them, but, I had expected of myself as well. So I suppose it's the first time I thought of it, that giving more credit to, what I do for an income was also a big, catalyst for me to really start doing the work. And the actual timing of my turnaround was 2012. I met a mentor and a friend named Warren Rustan, who I'd met through Entrepreneurs Organization. And that's when it really, the rubber started to meet the road, because now I had somebody that I really trusted and admired and wanted, really wanted change. And he helped guide me in that direction, probably like no one ever has, although his answer to you would be, you did the work, Dave. I just gave you a couple tips on how to get there.
Now he sounds like an important man, period. I know he's important to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably should have even started this conversation with a little pop quiz I do for guys oftentimes, which is I'll introduce myself, and I'm writing a book right now, so it's very fresh in my mind. This is a big part of it. And it's, hey, I'm Baruch. What's your name? And then the next question that invariably comes up, one of us will ask, right? The question all dudes ask each other since probably the time of Adam: what do you do?
Yeah.
Right? It's interesting. I've been studying this question for a long time, and women don't naturally go to, oh, hi, I'm Jody. Oh, hi, I'm Ariella. What do you do? Right?
Right.
There's like 17 steps in between asking, what am I asking? And when I ask you, Dave, what do you do?
You asked me what I do for work, I imagine.
Well, that's exactly right. Every guy says, oh, that he must be asking me what I do for work.
Yeah.
But that's what you defied in that opening statement, which was, I essentially said, hey, Dave, what do you do? And you essentially said, I do being a husband, I do being a dad, I do, you listed all these ways you allocate your time, energy, resources on this rock.
Yep.
And also I'm a contractor. And I think that's the big shift. Is you
Yeah.
see yourself in so much more robust than just fill in that blank with what I do for a living.
Yeah. No, I agree. I have a dream to be so many other things too than just a contractor. So that's probably a big part of it. Is I spend a lot of my time, you know, strategizing and planning and, goal setting and dreaming for what's next. And what's next is never, oh, I'm going to be the biggest contractor in Colorado. I don't think that way at all. What I really want to do is, create a lifestyle where we have, a very loving and functional and stable home environment, where we can spend time, serving others and have the freedom and flexibility to do the things that make our heart pitter patter versus just paying the bills.
But it's interesting because I wasn't with you on that previous leg of your journey when you struggled more professionally / financially, but your attention was clearly more on making it work professionally. And sometimes there's an inverse relationship, right? With the more resources we pour into making a living, sometimes we get further away from that goal. And in this chapter, anybody who's listening, and Dave Mann, he's flourishing throughout not only the state of Colorado, but I know you're moving out, beyond Colorado. And you just said you're flourishing financially, professionally, but you're really putting less attention on that as you are these other areas.
It's what it's come down to in the last year, I'd say, is I inadvertently worked so hard to become a good person that a lot of good things started happening for me and for our lives. And the result is the business is in a really good spot. And I give the credit to working really hard on, our own improvement as individuals and as a family that has led us to where we're at now financially.
And that's a revolution, especially as a man thing. So I have couple guys I'm working with in my office here the past couple of days, and they each said the same thing to me. That I challenge them because they talk about the work Adam versus home Adam versus buddies Adam. He's a different Adam in all these settings. And I said, that's part of the challenge. And all guys do this at first, compartmentalizing who I am. And I'm this over here and I'm that over here. And what you have done, and Scott and I talked a lot about this on our previous podcast, is you have gotten to a holistic view of Dave, where there's not husband Dave and buddy Dave and work Dave. There's Dave, right? It's not compartmentalized. And the more you can live that holistic life, it starts translating. So you do this men's work over here, this personal work over here, you're becoming a better person over here on the other side with business. Does that ring true for you?
Yeah, it's it's when you're challenged with being impatient, like I was, that was a big part of my problem. I was looking for the silver bullet. It was how can I do this faster and make it easier? And there wasn't any way to do it. I finally gave up on the, get rich quick ideology and realized that I had to pour myself into it. And it was so simple. And I thought going into it, it was such a mystery to me. But the truth is I got real disciplined. I became real consistent. I focused on being more loving and kind in every relationship that I was in. And with Warren specifically, he gave me some homework where he wanted me to get up at 5:30 a.m. every day and spend a couple minutes, in my case, thanking God for all my blessings. And then his version of, what we called the 32-minute ritual was 10 minutes of reading only positive thoughts, 10 minutes of thinking only positive thoughts, and 10 minutes of writing positive thoughts. So by 6:02 a.m., that's how I started my day for 562 straight days. And I have that journal still. And for my memory is on that 562nd day, I called him and I said, what's the meaning of this? And he said, for you to retrain your thoughts, for you to retrain the way you show up in the world. And I don't know if there was a finite moment, Baruch, when I realized it, but I've certainly had a bunch of stumbles since then, but we've continued to trend forward in such a positive way. And I'm telling you, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And my life has been an incredible blessing, since that time for sure.
Random question, but why is it called the 32-minute if there's 3 sections of 10?
Because the first 2 minutes was as he describes it, I want you to open your eyes and look over at your beautiful wife and swing your legs over the edge of the bed and look up to the sky and thank God for all your blessings. And that was the first 2 minutes.
So it's interesting too, because we've sort of come full circle and we'll wrap up. You've given me idea for like 10 more podcasts with you. So we'll have plenty to talk about. 10, 10, 10, right? That sort of bullshit, knee jerk. I'm all good. It's all good. And then, replacing it with 30 minutes, which is obviously 10, 10, 10, but it's a more holistic approach. It's less bullshit. It's more contemplative. It's more introspective. It's more consistent. I mean, that's a big word I know you've used many times, is consistently doing this.
Yeah. One of the great things he taught me along the way as well, Warren, was, design your life and go live it. There's no reason you can't design it any way you want it to be. And that was such a simple concept that, that was probably 3 or 4 years after the initial work. So maybe, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in there. And Jody and I took that to heart. And we came back and, we were renting a home at the time. We were underwater on other real estate at the time. Business was still kind of bouncing along at the time. And, between vision boards and coaching and therapy and lots of family meetings, that were super structured, we're in an incredible place in our lives now, from a love perspective, from a commitment perspective, from a financial perspective. And it goes back to, we got real consistent with what we wanted as a individuals and as a family. And I just said to her yesterday, I said, our life has never been better. And she said, I agree.
Amen, brother. Well, I feel like we are like one of those Tarantino movies or something where we started with the happy, his are never happy endings. We started with sort of the happy ending and then we rewind in the next one and talk about how you got there. And I want to specifically make sure we remember to do this. So I'm committing, in public to do this, is to go back to some of the, what I call the shatterings as a necessary, painful, but necessary stepping stone to rebuild your life, to get to this point. And so, we talked about the poem Invictus. Maybe we'll circle back to that, but just sort of priming the pumps for what's next. If you're willing, I'd love to do a part 2, more like the origin story of Dave.
Yeah, I would love to. And as I've shared with you before, another great mentor of mine used to always say, being listened to feels so much like being loved, I can hardly tell the difference. So I'm happy to keep talking if you're willing to keep listening.
I'm happy to keep loving you, brother. All right.
Thanks, dude. Love you too.
All right. To everybody else, jump over to defiantspirit.org where you can learn more about me. I'm going to get Dave's information over there pretty soon here because we're going to be launching a very cool opportunity for all of you guys listening. Stay tuned for that. That's just a little teaser. I'm not going to tell you what it is until we formally launch it sometime coming to a theater near you. Until then, defy your number and live your spirit. Thank you for listening to the Defiant Spirit Podcast with me, your host, Dr. Baruch Levy. If you like what you heard, please consider leaving a 5-star review and share this podcast with others. To learn more about the Defiant Spirit, get more inspirational content, or see how we might work together to live your Defiant Spirit, visit defiantspirit.org. Until then, take back your power and live your defiant